Hi, boys and girls. It's Miss Glover. I wanted to read you another story. But first of all, remember we've talked about fiction and nonfiction texts? Well, I'm going to read you a nonfiction text, which is a true story. And I'm going to make a personal connection with this story too, because this story took place in Lake City, South Carolina. And I grew up not too far in Sumter, South Carolina, a few years after this story happened. Now, this story is about a real person. His name was Ron McNair, and he grew up to be a very famous astronaut. And he went up on one of the shuttles, and I'll show you his picture from the back of the book. That's what he looked like when he grew up to be a real astronaut. Now, this book is called Ron's Big Mission, and it's one of our Scholastic books. I bought this at a Scholastic book fair, and I want to thank Scholastic for letting me read this story. The authors' names were Rose Blue and Corinne J. Naden. And we remember that the authors write the words, right? And the illustrator is Don Tate. And the illustrator draws the pictures. So let's read Ron's Big Mission. You're up early this morning, Ron. What's the rush? Said Mrs. McNair. Come and have your breakfast. I made some oatmeal. I have to go, Mama, said Ron, tying his sneakers. I have something to do this morning. You always have something to do, said his mother with a smile. Just be home by lunchtime, okay? Ron was 9 years old. That morning, he left home with a plan. He'd been thinking about it for a long time. It was a beautiful South Carolina summer day, and Ron looked up at the blue, blue sky. Someday, he thought, he would be up there flying a plane. He wanted to be a pilot when he grew up, but today, Ron had something else on his mind, something very important. Ron walked down the street as fast as he could. He didn't want to be late. Hi, Ron, said the grocer from the front of his store. There you are, just in time for a donut. Morning, Mr. Douglas, said Ron. Thank you, but there's someplace I've got to be. And Ron kept on walking. Down by the schoolyard, Ron saw his friend Carl. His friend was shooting baskets. All right, you made it, called Carl. Hi, Carl, said Ron. I wish I could stay, but I've got something important to do today. More important than basketball on summer vacation, said Carl. Are you kidding? Ron laughed. He loved to play basketball, but not today. Today was too important. And Ron kept on walking. When Ron got to the Lake City Library, he stopped. This was it. He was hot from walking so fast, and he was nervous. He took a deep breath, lifted his head high, and walked in the door. Mrs. Scott was busy getting ready for all the people who would be coming to the library today. As the head librarian, she had to make sure that everything was neat and orderly. Mrs. Scott looked up to welcome her first visitor of the day. She smiled as Ron walked in. He was her best customer. Ron gave a little wave to Mrs. Scott and went right to the shelves. It took Ron a while to find some books. He always looked for books that showed children who looked like him, but that was hard. There were not many books about black kids on the shelves. At last, Ron found some books on airplanes. He took the books and started to walk to the front desk. Ron felt nervous and his hands felt a little sweaty, but he knew what he wanted to do. Mrs. Fielding, a white lady at the desk, who was often at the library, stopped him. "You can give me the books and I'll check them out for you, Ron," she said gently. "No thanks, Miss Fielding," Ron said. "I'm going to do it all by myself." "But Ron," she started to say. Ron was already on his way to the front desk. He put the books on the counter. "I'd like to check these out, please," said Ron. The desk clerk didn't look at him. Didn't she hear me, Ron wondered. Ron knew what he had to do. He jumped on the counter. He wanted the desk clerk to know he was serious. "I'd like to check out these books," he said. At first, the desk clerk and Mrs. Scott just looked at each other. "You know you can't check out books, Ron," said Mrs. Scott. "You can read them here. That's the rule. Only white people can check out books from the library." Ron looked at Mrs. Scott and the desk clerk politely, but he would not budge. "I always read them here. Today, I want to check them out," said Ron. Mrs. Scott and the desk clerk did not know what to do. Ron wouldn't get off the counter. People were staring. Finally, the desk clerk called the Lake City Police. Two policemen came right away. "Let somebody check out the books for you, son," said one of the policemen. "You know the rules." But Ron just shook his head. He would not budge. Now, Mrs. Scott called Ron's mother. Mrs. McNair came to the library very quickly. "I know you feel bad. I know how you feel, baby," she said, "but you have to follow the rules." "I can't, Mama," Ron told her. "It's wrong. The rules are not fair. Why can't I check out books like everyone else?" No one said anything. Not the desk clerk, not Mrs. Scott, not the policeman, not even Ron's mother. Mrs. Scott looked at Ron. She thought about all the times that Ron came to the library and all the times he sat at the tables for hours looking over so many books. He was her best customer, and she knew what she had to do. Mrs. Scott walked back to her office and started writing. Ron wondered what she was doing. Mrs. Scott returned and handed Ron a library card. His own library card. Ron looked at Mrs. Scott and smiled. As he jumped to the floor, he thought he saw her smile too. "I'd like to check out these books, please," he said, handing the card to the desk clerk. The desk clerk took his library card and stamped the cards in the back of the books. "These are due back in 2 weeks," she said. I love his smile. Ron smiled. "Thank you," he said. He tucked the books under his arm and took his mother's hand. Together they walked home. Ron couldn't wait to get to his room. And open to page 1. I think this is such a great story. It reminds me of what leaders we can be. And I know that you guys are reading your books and enjoying them, and I hope you'll keep on reading. Thanks.